My mother told my 7-year-old daughter she was born ugly like her father. She looked up at her and said, "Grandma, you talk really mean for someone nobody likes." I want to tell you about the 11 seconds during which my mother absorbed what my daughter had said, because the 11 seconds were where my mother understood what kind of grandmother she had been and what kind of granddaughter she had failed to recognize. My mother is named Joyce. Joyce is 68. Joyce had been a difficult mother for me my entire life. Joyce had been making comments about my appearance since I was 7. Joyce had been delivering the comments under the framing of helping me. The framing had been the cover. My daughter is named Reese. Reese is 7. Reese has a father named Wesley. Wesley is a kind man. Wesley is also a man my mother had decided was beneath me when we had started dating 10 years ago. Wesley is a high school history teacher. Joyce had been telling people Wesley was just a teacher. The just had been Joyce's specialty. The incident was at a Sunday lunch at my mother's house. There were 5 of us: Joyce, me, Wesley, Reese, and my younger brother Eric. Eric was 31. Eric had been Joyce's preferred child for our entire lives. Reese had been at the lunch because Wesley and I had been trying for 2 years to figure out how to manage Joyce as a grandmother. We had been preparing Reese in advance for events. We had been telling Reese that Grandma Joyce sometimes said things that were not okay, and that Reese could ignore them or tell us if they were upsetting. The lunch was at the dining room table. We had been eating for about 15 minutes when Joyce had been looking at Reese. Joyce said, "You know, honey, you have your father's nose." Reese said, "Yes, I love Daddy's nose." Joyce said, "Well, honey, the thing about your father's nose is, you were born ugly like your father." Joyce had said it with a small laugh. Joyce had said it as if it were a joke. In the first second, I started to say something. In the second second, Reese had stopped chewing. In the third second, Reese had been processing. In the fourth second, Reese had set down her fork. In the fifth second, Reese had looked at Joyce. In the sixth second, Reese had said, "Grandma." In the seventh second, Reese had said, "You talk really mean for someone nobody likes." The room was silent. My brother Eric had been holding a glass of water. The glass had stopped at his lips. Wesley had stopped mid-sentence. I had been about to defend my daughter. I had stopped because my daughter had defended herself. Reese was not done. Reese said, "Grandma, I want to tell you something." Joyce said, "Honey, I was just teasing." Reese said, "No, you do this every time we are here. You say mean things and you laugh. You say them to my mom too. I have been listening. I am only 7, but I have noticed." Joyce had been processing in real time. Joyce had been processing the fact that her 7-year-old granddaughter had just delivered a more complete summary of Joyce's behavior than any adult had delivered in Joyce's life. Joyce teared up. The tearing up was an unusual event. Joyce had not been a woman who teared up. The tearing up had told me that the words from Reese had landed in a place that the years of words from me had not landed. The 7 had been the unfiltered access. The 7 had been the version of the words that had bypassed all of Joyce's defenses. I had been about to do what I had done my whole life. I did something else. I said, "Reese, you can finish your lunch. I want to talk to Grandma in the kitchen. Wesley, please stay with Reese." Wesley said yes. I stood up. Joyce stood up. In the kitchen, I said, "Mom, your granddaughter just told you what I have been trying to tell you for 35 years. Your granddaughter said it more clearly than I have ever said it. Your granddaughter is right. You have been mean. You have been mean to me. You have been mean to my husband. You have been mean to my daughter. I want to tell you something. This is the last lunch we are coming to until you do something specific." Joyce said, "What?" I said, "You are going to therapy. I have a list of therapists. I have been carrying the list for 2 years. I have been waiting for the right moment. The right moment is now because your granddaughter forced it. You are going to pick a therapist from the list. You are going to attend for at least 6 months. The therapist is going to send us a letter confirming you have been working. Until then, you are not going to see Reese. You are not going to see me. You are not going to see Wesley. This is the boundary. Are you willing?" Joyce was quiet for a long time. Joyce said, "Yes, okay. I have known something has been wrong with me for a long time. I have been not knowing what to do with it. Your daughter just told me what to do with it. I will go." Joyce went. The therapist was the 3rd name on the list I had given her. The therapist had sent us a letter at the 7-month mark indicating that Joyce had been doing meaningful work and that we could begin reintroducing limited contact. Joyce had been making fewer comments. Joyce had been catching herself. Joyce had been apologizing in real time when she had caught herself. I want to tell you what happened 3 weeks ago because 3 weeks ago is where the new part of the story begins. I got a call from Eric. Eric had not called me in about 2 months. Eric said, "Hey, I have some news. I am engaged." I said, "Congratulations." I meant it. Eric said the woman's name was Heidi. Eric said he had been dating Heidi for about a year. Then Eric said the part that made my stomach tighten. Eric said, "I want to have the engagement party at Mom's house. I want Mom to host it. She has been doing better. You said so yourself." I had said so. I had told him Joyce was improving. The truth was now being used as a reason to do something I was not sure about. I told Eric I would think about it. Eric said he wanted to do it in 3 weeks. I called Joyce the next morning. Joyce sounded careful. Joyce said, "Eric told me he called you. I am so happy for him. I want to host it. I have been talking to my therapist about it. My therapist said I should try." I heard the word try. Joyce did not say her therapist said she was ready. Joyce said her therapist said she should try. The difference between ready and try is the difference between a finish line and a starting block. I called the therapist's office the next morning. The therapist called me back that afternoon. The therapist said Joyce had made real progress. Then the therapist said, "Family gatherings with high emotional stakes are where old patterns come back. I would recommend a smaller get-together first, before the big party." I called Eric that evening. I said, "Eric, I talked to Joyce's therapist. The therapist thinks we should do a smaller dinner first, just to make sure Mom is comfortable." Eric's tone changed. Eric said, "You always do this. You always find a reason to keep Mom at arm's length. She has been going to therapy for almost 2 years. When is it enough for you?" I tried to explain. I said the therapist had recommended it. Eric said, "This is my engagement, not your therapy session." Eric hung up. The hanging up was the sound of my brother choosing what he wanted over what the therapist had said. I made a decision. I told Wesley. I said, we are going. But here is the rule. If Joyce makes a single comment about anyone's appearance or weight or worth, we leave. We do not argue. We just leave. Wesley said, I agree. That weekend, Reese was at the kitchen table drawing when she asked, Mom, why are we going to Grandma's house for a party? I said, Uncle Eric is getting married. We are going to celebrate. Reese kept drawing. Reese said, will Grandma be nice? I said, Grandma has been working on that. Reese looked up. Reese said, okay, I will watch. The watching. My 9-year-old daughter had just told me she was going to be paying attention, the same way she had been noticing at 7. The party was on a Saturday. We pulled into the driveway. Joyce had cleaned the house in a way that felt intentional. There were flowers in a pot by the front door that had not been there before. The flowers were a choice. The choice was for us. I opened the door and stepped inside, and that is when I saw the walls. There were framed photos that had not been there before. There was a photo of Reese from her last school picture. There was a photo of me as a child. There was a photo of Wesley and me on our wedding day. The photos were all new. I felt hope. The hope was small and careful, but it was the first time I had walked into Joyce's house and felt something other than the tightening in my chest. Joyce came to the door. Joyce hugged Reese first. Joyce said, you look beautiful, Reese. Reese said, thank you, Grandma. The exchange had never happened in this house before. The normal was the miracle. Joyce hugged me. Joyce whispered, I am glad you came. I know this is hard. The acknowledgement was new. The acknowledgement felt real. The first hour of the party went well. Joyce was warm. Joyce was measured. Joyce walked me over to Heidi at one point. Joyce put her hand on my arm. Joyce said, this is my daughter. She is the reason I started working on myself. I looked at Joyce. Joyce had never credited me before. The words sat in the air. I began to relax. Then Eric found me in the hallway. Eric said, I need to talk to you. I followed him to a back room. Eric closed the door. Eric said, I want you to apologize to Mom tonight. I said, apologize for what? Eric said, for what you did at that lunch 2 years ago? For letting your daughter humiliate her? For cutting her off? For making her beg to see her own grandchild? I said, Eric, I gave Mom a choice. She chose to go to therapy. She is better because of it. Eric said, she cried every week for the first 3 months. You broke her. I said, she was already broken, Eric. She was breaking all of us. Eric said, you sound just like her right now. Controlling, deciding what everyone else needs. You are just like Mom. The words hit me in a place I did not expect. The accusation was that I was becoming Joyce. The accusation was that the thing I had spent 8 years in therapy trying to undo was the thing I was turning into. I left the room. My hands were shaking. I found Wesley in the kitchen. I said, Eric just told me I am just like her. Wesley was about to steady me, but before Wesley could do any of that, Reese walked into the kitchen. Reese was walking the way a child walks when something has been put inside them that is too heavy for a child to carry. Reese said, Mom, Uncle Eric just told me something. He said that Grandma was really sad for a long time because of what I said at that lunch. He said Grandma cried a lot. He said it was because of me. The words went into me the way a blade goes into something soft. My brother had gone to my 9-year-old daughter at a party. My brother had taken the thing that Reese had done at 7, the brave thing, the honest thing, the thing that had broken a pattern that had been running for decades, and he had turned it into a weapon, and he had pointed it at the child who had done it. I felt a cold fury. The fury was clean. The fury was the kind that goes still. I kneeled down. I said, Reese, that is not true. None of that was because of you. Do you understand me? Reese nodded. Wesley said, I will handle Reese. You handle Eric. I walked into the living room. I walked up to Eric. I said quietly, you told my daughter that she made her grandmother cry. You put that on a 9-year-old. You and I are going to talk about this right now, outside. Eric followed me. I walked to the front door. The porch was empty. Eric came out behind me. Eric closed the door. Eric said, she should know what she caused. I said, she was 7 years old. She told the truth. That is not a crime. What you just did is exactly what Mom used to do. You just put guilt on a child to protect an adult. That is what Mom did to me for 35 years. And you just did it to my daughter in 30 seconds. Eric was quiet. The quiet was long. I thought Eric was going to argue. Eric did not. Eric said, nobody ever told me Mom was wrong when I was a kid. Nobody ever pulled me aside and said the things she was saying were not okay. You got therapy. You got Wesley. You got to figure it out. I just got told I was the favorite. And being the favorite meant nobody thought I needed help. Eric's voice cracked. The cracking was the sound of something that had been held together for a long time starting to come apart. Eric said, I am not defending what she did. I am angry that you got to name it and I never did. I am angry that your 7-year-old figured it out faster than I did at 31. I stood on that porch and I looked at my brother and I saw him clearly for the first time. I had always thought the golden child was the one who was safe. I was wrong. The golden child had not been protected. The golden child had been purchased. Eric's compliance had been bought with approval. The cost had been 31 years of standing next to something broken and being told it was fine because it was not aimed at him. But it had been aimed at him sideways. It had been aimed at him in the way that watching someone you love be hurt by someone you are supposed to love is its own kind of hurt that nobody names because nobody thinks to name it. I said, Eric, you can still name it. It is not too late. Eric said, I do not even know where to start. I said, I have a list. We walked back inside. Joyce was in the living room. Joyce had the face of a mother who knows something is wrong before anyone tells her something is wrong. Joyce said, what is going on? I said, Mom, Eric and I just had a conversation we should have had a long time ago about what your behavior did to both of us. Not just me, both of us. Joyce looked at Eric. Joyce said, Eric, what is she talking about? Eric looked up. His eyes were red. Eric said, Mom, I told Reese that she made you cry. I told a 9-year-old that your pain was her fault. Joyce's face changed. The face change was something breaking open. Joyce said, Eric, you did not. Eric said, I did. And I did it because I have been angry. I have been angry because nobody ever told me you were hurting me too. They just told me I was your favorite. And I thought that meant I was safe, but I was not safe. I was just the one you did not aim at directly. I caught everything sideways. I learned that love was something you earned by not making you angry. And I have been doing that my entire life. Joyce sat down. Joyce sat down slowly, the way a person sits down when their legs have decided for them. The room was still. Heidi was standing near the doorway. Heidi was letting the moment belong to the people it belonged to. Joyce spoke. Joyce said, I know. My therapist and I have been talking about you, Eric. I have been telling her that I was worried about you. I have been telling her that I thought you were fine because you never pushed back. She told me that the ones who never never push back are the ones who are carrying the most. Joyce looked at her son with something I had never seen on Joyce's face before. The something was grief for what she had done to someone else. Joyce said, I am sorry. I am sorry I made you the one who had to agree with me. I am sorry I made you think that agreeing was love. Eric broke. Eric sat down on the couch and put his face in his hands. The sound that came out of him was small. The sound was the sound of a 31-year-old man letting go of something he had been holding since he was a boy. I sat down next to him. I put my hand on his back. I did not say anything. Joyce stayed where she was. Joyce said, I am going to stay right here. My therapist told me that when someone is hurting because of what I did, my job is to stay present and not make it about me. So I am staying right here. The staying was the hardest thing I had ever watched Joyce do. The staying was harder than going to therapy. The staying was Joyce sitting with the pain she had caused and not rushing to make herself feel better about it. The staying was new. The staying was real. Then Reese walked in from the kitchen. Reese walked past me. Reese walked up to Eric. Reese stood in front of my brother who had his face in his hands. Reese said, Uncle Eric, it is not your fault either. Grandma was the grown-up. You were a kid, just like me. Eric looked up. Eric looked at his 9-year-old niece. Eric said, when did you get so smart? Reese said, I have been listening. The engagement party did not continue as planned that night. The party became something else. The party became the first honest family gathering Joyce's family had ever had. Heidi sat with Eric on the couch for a long time. I sat with Joyce in the kitchen. Joyce said, I want Eric to see my therapist, or someone from the list. Will you help me talk to him about it? I said, I already did. He is ready. 2 weeks later, Eric started therapy. I drove him to his first appointment. In the car, Eric said, I cannot believe a 7-year-old started all of this. I said, she was just being honest. Eric said, I want to be honest too. I am sorry I told Reese it was her fault. That was the worst thing I have done. I said, you are doing the thing mom could not do for 66 years. You are naming it at 33. That is not too late. Reese does not know she broke a pattern that had been running for decades. Reese does not know she gave her uncle permission to stop pretending. Reese knows that grandma is nicer now and that Uncle Eric calls more often. I think about the day Reese will understand all of it. I am not in a rush. The day is ahead of us. The family is walking toward it together, which is the part that is new.